Welcome to the new Kevin Smith, The Great Witness Show. We're here with Dean Kevin, who's going to share his experiences with us, and we will try to become more aware and expand our awareness, and that's what it's all about, just becoming more aware and having better survival on all levels of creation. Welcome, Kevin.
I've been describing on recent real side experiences how a number of the beings encountered now are taking more so the form of zombies. And although zombie-orientated experiences have been shown to many new friends over the years, it seems they are far more frequent currently. Generally, what is afforded in regards to zombie experiences are future views regarding humanity overall, as the agreements through the human collective consciousness are such that this is a seemingly inevitable overall effect that will become so. Everything is as it is now in reality. Everything the instant effect of itself on the real side. And if there are agreements that effect mass zombification, then such agreements, as with any idea created and agreed to, can be provided as a view to the personal self via a real awareness that is a part of all real awareness that is through and animates all consciousness and the ideas effected from it, and has full access to everything the overall consciousness comprises of now. But as is the nature of how it has been decided through the consciousness as to the rollout of cause to effect on the physical, so what is the immediate effect of itself in actuality takes the moments it does to become so on the physical level. It's like a movie where the decisions made at the beginning play out in a sequential rollout of simulation that effects from the decisions, and the movie culminates as it does, whereas in reality the entirety of the movie already is contained on the disc, the effects already in play from the decisions, and it's just the personal self that is taken through the simulated frame by frame movie experience. Everything is according to decision and agreement, and so for a zombification of a species to be so, this has to be decided. Obviously, one wouldn't consciously desire a zombified body, and so anything that befalls an individual or a species that isn't especially favourable must be through the securing of agreement, where what is agreed to isn't exactly what it seems to be on the surface. The entire success of this simulator being according to the dark forces controlled design was dependent on agreement secured to their control through underhanded, marketed, ployed methods, etc. And once this was established overall through the consciousness, the controllers have a free will permission to exercise this control in whatever way they want. An overall foundation of control they can continuously build upon, and a species then that is not only in maintained agreement to control, mainly subconsciously, through all the lifetimes individuals have acquiesced to control, and the consciousness has then continued to compound with this overall idea agreement of control, but that has continued to agree generally to be further controlled, so will the experience effected reflect this agreement, and so also will the body types reflect the consciousness and its general construction. Restriction and control will express in the body forms, and a controlled species invariably finds itself in more robotic forms, or forms in which control is made more so, for as we agree to be more controlled, we effect the circumstances by which we can be controlled, body types where control can be more so exacted, robotic forms where the free will creating mechanisms are rather usurped, taken out of our hands, and the idea creating processes through the body vehicles orchestrated through technology, the robotic vehicles are connected with. And as I have described, a phase of the robotization process of humanity is one in which there is a period before this external technological control of the body vehicles and their mechanics is stabilized, and during which humanity descends into a mindless shuffling zombie-like creatures. Hence why, on the real side, any human, or humans in general, who have not only subconsciously maintained their agreements to control, through virtue of remaining immersed with the personal self only, which by doing so guarantees that whatever the consciousness comprises of, one is the perpetuated effect of, but are also consciously agreeing with control, the accepting of the vaccines, etc., are zombies now in reality, but a zombie state that hasn't reached its cause to effect rollout on the physical. And this agreement seems rather set in place, as the presence of humans expressing as the zombie form they actually are now in real side reality is a constant, not so much the robotization final effect, suggesting agreement for the completion of the robotization of humanity has not been fully secured, but the zombie phase definitely is agreement, locked in seemingly. But it isn't just zombies that seem very frequent on the real side. There is another body form that recently seems equally as predominant. It must be remembered that all body forms are simply the mechanics by which we experience that which we have effected through the agreement ideas of the body vehicles, and installed then these ideas in the consciousness, our engine room, which generates our simulated game. And so, regardless of the body type, we all are this real awareness. That's singular purpose and drive is to recognize the is through all the comparison that the simulated experiences through the created personal self provide. It's just a case of getting the personal self on board with this real intent objective that it can be so. And so, body forms, as I said, reflect from the consciousness construction, and should we have very distorted body types, this is an indication of the nature of our decided consciousness of ideas. And although we may not be currently occupying such distorted bodies on the physical level, as cause and effect on the physical rolls out as it does, on the real side, all individuals can be seen as they are now, as their consciousness of agreement and idea decisions currently happen to be, in the moment we encounter them. The body form type I have been witnessing recently, along with the zombies, seems to be best described as mutations, in that the body type has been altered, distorted, as to its original template base state into something else, for whatever reasons this may be. Of course, many body types and forms may look rather strange and unappealing to the human eye, but it doesn't necessarily mean they are mutated. It's simply all the various expressions of body types in operation that stem from all the various consciousness constructs that have effected such variety and diversity of body types into being. And so it might be hard to differentiate between a body form that started a certain way and became mutated, and a body form that naturally looks very different in comparison to a human. The only way to determine then a mutation is if we were witness to what transpired that effected such a distortion, or that the impressions were provided us by a real awareness that is through all consciousness and can afford us a detail regarding anything simulated we might see, all the ideas that had culminated in the surface visual. And so, just as the real awareness is a determinant of intent of all we encounter, as the ideas, thoughts, consciousness, that can be read in addition to the surface visual presented front, so the real awareness will afford such details where it makes sense for them to be provided to the personal self. As everything we are shown by the real awareness and the guides is always life and awareness beneficial, including all the additional impression detail, and sometimes details are omitted or are not provided depending on the situation, for sometimes the less detail afforded, the more an experience can roll out a certain way, and if that certain way makes more sense, is more awareness beneficial, then the details lacking that perhaps get us into unfavourable situations, but that overall are more awareness bolstering, that have us stronger as a result of the additional adversity, then this is why such experiences may lack impressions and intent reading that may have had us avoid getting so embroiled and entangled in the very adversity and confrontation and having to creatively deal with it, that we would then overall have benefited from. It's really a case then of the real awareness always doing that which makes the most sense with the reality of itself, and taking its personal self through the experiences, and the personal self rather just learning to accept this, to simply go through and be shown what it is, and not to think it knows better than life and the real awareness, but to accept it is simply a tool, a mechanism for the generating and experiencing of a simulation for the real awareness to recognize the is from. And so, in this vast multi-dimensional simulator, effected from an overall consciousness, our consciousness is a part of, we have this open, effected game arena, whereas we step into the consciousness on the real side, as we step into this multi-dimensional effected game, therefore, as we go about our activities, which rather demand that we do, as we approach and engage with all beings who are resigned and locked into their consciousness, and so only by stepping into the simulated creation through our consciousness door can we interact with them, and also the facing of the personal self and creation rather has us dealing with confrontation, as the ideas we face will have the various ideas affiliated with them, including the ideas that are consciousness vehicles of others. So ultimately, as we operate through the consciousness, we operate in this overall simulator arena, where potentially any other individual whose consciousness is a part of the effecting of, we can encounter. And as I said, what I'm seeing now seems to be a growing in quantity army of mutated body types, of various distorted natures and appearances, that whatever their body types originally were, had been somehow altered into that which they now have become, to the extent that it's hard to discern the original form, though some retain enough of their original form that their species can be pinpointed, and this mutating situation seems to be affecting all manner of species, from human to reptilian to all aliens in between. At first, I would see the occasional mutated body type, and most would be very aggressively driven, prone to immediately attack, for just as I have recounted, where some of the assignments I am undertaking are suddenly interfered with by zombie humans, as their agreements to control not only express as their body types, but through their actions, they are in opposition with anything that would undermine the controllers and their controlled positions. Such is their agreement with the controllers. So it is the same with these various mutants. Their body types an expression of the choices and agreements through the consciousness, and a distorted consciousness then that is as equally distorted attitude-wise, with the abrasive inclinations these mutants all seem to have. As an example, I was on assignment recently, the details not important, but I was constantly hunted and hounded throughout by a pair of mutated and disfigured beings, and had to constantly nullify their assaults. And on another experience, I was flying through an area of creation, and another mutation type being took to the air also, albeit clumsily, and would attempt to attack me, but I would simply accelerate beyond its top speed ability, self-limited as it had decided to be in this regard. Sometimes we may bring ourselves deliberately into situations where abrasively orientated beings are afforded their opportunities to attack us, for we could just as easily evade them through a real awareness that can insert and extract the personal self in any way or at any moment it decides, or simply not place the personal self in such a predicament in the first place. But as much as we are almost opening ourselves up to attack opportunities as we enter the monsters' lairs, we also are giving them the opportunity to decide differently, and then whatever they do choose is up to them, and the consequences, their effects follow. For we are ultimately extending the opportunity of the ears to all. Every being is precious. Every consciousness that agreement is retracted from is less burden on the simulator. A simulator that is going into demise through all the restricting ideas of the consciousness being clung to agreed with, like every web page and file open on every computer at the same time, and the computer struggling under the effort to deal with the data overload. And as I said, if we were to determine instantly the intent of individuals or the real nature of the ideas we encounter on the real side, we may be less inclined to engage with them or enter the buildings that we know are dark force creations, whereas were we to do so, we will have experience we otherwise would not have had, and to be able to report back with more detail as to the goings on inside these dark force creations, not just a brief glance at the external surface and then move on. And so sometimes these impressions are withheld, and although the personal self can learn everything needed without even entering the simulation, through the real awareness impressions, going through the adversity rather has it more so stick in the memory of the personal self to share later on waking. Being in the movie is far more intense an experience than just watching it from the aside from creation, real awareness view. And so, very often, when we seem to be in what could easily have been avoidable entanglements with others, we are giving them a chance to decide something else, to be different, as every moment we make a choice, and these individuals are not resigned to the attitudes and personality they have created for themselves. They don't have to murder people because they have decided for the longest time to be a murderer. And eventually, all individuals must see how, regardless of what they choose, they are resigned to the effects. But certain choices and effects are more beneficial than others, and being a murderer as a choice will yield somewhat undesirable life positions and circumstances for such an individual, as everything equals itself. But anyway, initially there were just random, isolated attacks by these curious mutants as I would go about my real awareness business. But it seems the number of mutants are increasing and incorporating more and more species into a kind of a mutant collective. And more recently, I've been seeing how there is a vast mutant army always in operation throughout the real side, the multi-dimensions of creation, and perhaps on the physical also. For indeed, even if this wasn't as yet a physical level situation, if these mutated body types are the instant effects of choices and agreements being made now, then if these agreements are maintained, they will express also on the physical at some stage. And the means by which this mutant army is growing is that not only are they a little like the Star Trek Borg in regards to a collective hive mind consciousness, but like the Borg, they can seemingly infect other body types and turn them into mutants also, and rather absorb them into their collective. This I have seen them do via various means. Usually, they will latch onto the target with tentacle-like appendages and transmit what seems to be then this mutagen effect, or they will spray fluids or project globular mucus-like matter at the target that, if it makes a contact, has the same effect. For there have been several experiences where I and others had been rescuing children from these mutants. There would be certain scenes where these mutants were surging into a certain location, and a group and I would be tasked with inserting ourselves into the simulated situation and extracting groups of terrified children and preventing them from becoming infected and mutated also. Everything is, of course, based on agreement, and if we find ourselves being attacked, it is agreement that has allowed this to be, consciously or subconsciously, and also the success of the attacker is agreement dependent. The exact nature of our experience, the fine detail, always must be the precise ideas of it we have agreed to and placed in the consciousness, with subconscious agreements being generally those that generate these attack potentialities. For naturally, who would agree to being attacked by monsters and mutants? And so somewhere must have been installed consciousness agreements that have manifested in this way. If we step into the personal self-consciousness, we are effectively open to all in the simulator, and they will engage with us, if they do, according to their inclinations. But if we have, say, faced and released all agreements through the consciousness, effectively there can be nothing we are clinging to idea-wise that can allow for us to be successfully harmed. Although the facing of the self is a process, and until complete, we always will have certain agreements that express as the ability of certain individuals to be able to harm us, or certain situations we can't handle. But at least in such circumstances, we can withdraw from that which agreements in the consciousness dictate we can't deal with. We can remove ourselves from the simulation, standing in the nowness of the real awareness aside from it, instant extraction from any predicament on the real side. And so for those who are being attacked and seemingly unable to prevent such, the agreements in the consciousness that allow it must be there, and also an inability to step from the consciousness that extraction can be possible. Either such individuals are unable to, if they are too emotionally invested in their situation, as emotion activation will keep you in the personal self and therefore in the simulated, affected situations, or that perhaps they are not aware of the real awareness that they are, or how to step into its reality, etc. Whatever the reasons, sometimes we will find ourselves on rescue operations, especially where children are concerned, as they are very much targeted by the dark forces, as the dark forces work to lock them into agreement with the consciousness as quickly as possible, to be additional cogs in the overall controlled simulator machine, as children will still be connected with the real awareness until they become literally consciousness matrix absorbed, and until then they are uncontrollable variables. The dark forces and their various minions seek to lock down, attack, kidnap, intimidate, etc. on the physical and on the real side. So I'm uncertain if this ever-growing mutant army is working on behalf of the dark forces, as it seemed more so they represented something entirely different, an agenda all of their own, where they were converting all to their collective, irrespective of the targets being controllers or the controlled, as were my impressions. But if they are attacking and converting individuals, and this serves to keep those they convert from their real awareness, then effectively this is beneficial for the dark force controllers. If anything, they are spreading waves of fear and terror as they go about their real side mutant mass conversions, and emotion is as good as any means that will keep you from the nowness of your real awareness and be detrimental to your process therefore. And as much as agreements allow attacks of any kind and their degree of success, agreements can allow for rescue and the assistance from others. We decide our movies. We decide the presence of the villains and the rescuers, as though we were extending these roles, that those deciding can then step into and basically provide us the experience we had chosen for ourselves. And so our rescue operations in regards to the children in recent weeks are met with varying degrees of success. As I said, it's an experience that has nothing really to do with us. We are simply operating within the agreement parameters the children set. Several occasions, my group and I would be holed up in bunkers and areas with the children, as we defended these positions and tried to keep the mutants at bay, again operating within the simulation as it is decided by those whose experience it is. And as I said, the various mutants would try and latch onto the children with their tendrils, some expelling mucus-like globules at them, all for the purposes of infection and turning them into mutants also. We would be sprayed with the mucus also, but again, nothing can feature as experience unless we agree with it, and a mutant can try and convert an individual all it wants. But if the agreement isn't there, nothing will happen. And with those becoming more aware, so can they walk through a fire, resist and survive what others can't, simply because they are more so aside from any agreements which dictate limitation and the ability of others to exact harm upon them. And more recently, a day or so ago, I would have what seemed to be an audience with what would be then the head of this mutant collective, the top beings. For a little like the reptilians, where they have a hive mind consciousness collective, but have a royalty that dictates their lives, so it seemed to be the case here with this ever-growing mutant army. The scene was curious, where the royal mutants would occupy an area below and in the centre of this stone-like structure, and above and surrounding it, on a platform that extended around the periphery, were droves of various mutants in all their mutated forms. As I watched, more and more mutants would materialize on this platform, as though their number were ever increasing. Certain beings and body types had been captured and brought here also, but not converted. They were instead dragged into the pit below, where the royal mutants awaited them. Perhaps the royal mutants wanted to convert these particular captured beings personally. Interestingly, as I rather had my audience with and spoke with the royal mutants, I learned that yes, they were converting every being into their kind. This was their objective, from one end of creation to another. That yes, they were rather forcing the issue. Evidently agreements through the overall consciousness that allowed this imposition and mass simulator conversion, but they also ideally preferred beings to openly agree, to volunteer themselves, for by their reckoning, simulator mass conversion was inevitable, and so they reasoned, why not give yourself willingly, instead of trying to run, etc. For really, it wasn't like the beings they converted were harmed or killed, simply assuming another form, although, as I said, it seemed in no way beneficial a situation, awareness speaking. But then again, it would really be just another body form, and the ears can be recognized irrespective of the body type and the consciousness. Although a collective consciousness, a hive mind, is a little along similar lines to having your thoughts and ideas created externally through technological means if you were robotized, in that this situation represented then more control, a collective hive mind, where your thoughts were rather thought for you, rather a case again of a usurping of your own free will activation of the body vehicles. And if such a collective mutant consciousness had no inclination or real intent to recognize the ears, then the personal selves of all those mutated and a part of it would surely not have their thoughts, ideas, their personal intent aligned with this real ears purpose objective. But then again, this does present an opportunity, for if all personal selves are controlled through the will of the mutant royalty, and if, say, the mutant royalty did decide to step up and become more aware, then every being who had become a part of this collective, who may not have decided to step up while being the species they previously were, will automatically decide as one to become more aware. So an interesting possibility. But as things stood at this moment, these royal mutants, and all those they had assimilated into their mutant collective, had the singular objective to convert all to their kind, and no interest in their real awareness or the ears. And so we will see what happens with this. As I said, I'm having many encounters with these mutants of late, and they seem to be popping into various experiences, as they well would if they are converting on the mass scale they seem to be, that as we operate in creation on the real side, we will very likely encounter their kind more and more.
Again, that's terrific, Kevin, because it describes a lot. And yes, have fun, go with this simply because that's what's happening. Hey, they're just collecting the people for us, because eventually they're going to realize they got nothing, they got nowhere to go, etc. So we open the door for them. So it's just getting them ready. So it's kind of like they're incubating in their new body type. So it's all okay. Everything's fine. So we always have the advantage to be creative and present something that makes more sense, and takes time for them to see it like anybody. This is, huge. And when people come into this, it doesn't matter what they've been through. That's all puffs of smoke. The thing is that the reality is that all life is now. It's the new nowness now, and to recognize it, well, that's a huge journey. Take you the rest of your life and beyond that. So who has the patience and courage to endure it? Well, this is where the real test comes in through creation, but we have the upper hand as the opportunity. And so that's the fun part. That's what I see, because at any moment, it doesn't take much, and all of a sudden they all come and decide to wake up. So a step at a time here. So yes, thank you so much, Kevin. That's terrific. Thank you for all that explanation and everything. It really helps a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. You're like the real news, the current affairs, what's going on, especially on the real side. It's great. Mutants, by their agreeing to distortion, I mean, that's what happens to their consciousness and then into their body types, because they're agreeing to distorted ideas and consciousness and considerations. So naturally, they're going to be distorted in all respects and all levels. And yeah, the goo that you saw that they're trying to infect the kids with, I mean, you could say that's the vaccine goo on the physical level, and they're infecting people with fear on an emotional level, subconscious level. So it's all about infection here on the physical to get the agreement that they need to create these mutant armies that are running rampant. And we see it in our friends, you know, I see it in my friends. It's just that they don't see it. They don't see it coming. You really don't see it coming. It's so subtle. Just by agreeing to the authorities and to the standard, to being normal, you know, just by being normal, trying to be normal and fit in, you're agreeing to this stuff, and it creeps on into you. And before you know it, you are one of them, you know, you're a mutant and they're a zombie, and you don't even know it happened. You don't even know what took you over. And it's a process that they've really perfected, the controllers, to where they can get what they want. And it's, you're seeing it. So thanks, Kevin. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, there seem to be three types of being that present as distortion at the moment on the real side. As I said, the zombies are very predominant, and also these mutants I spoke of here. But also there seems to be something else that's coming in now as well, which Pierce, another new friend, made mention of the other day when I think he shared Mia, his daughter's experience, when she was referring to this black oil, which seems to be some kind of intelligent expression of, I wouldn't really call it a body type, but it seems to be a delivery mechanism by which it can infect body vehicles and take over them in a similar way as the mutants are able to convert other beings and body types to their kind. And you see a lot of depictions of this black oil stuff in movies, and the X-Files had a lot of that in it, where this black oil substance would infect individuals and take over them. And in the X-Files, it was considered to be an alien intelligence that was billions of years old, had been lurking in the planet undisturbed and undiscovered until humanity dug a little too deeply with their oil with their oil extraction technologies, and came across it. And of course, as we know, a lot of times what is depicted in the movies and the series is what's actually happening. And the other day on the real side, the other night on the real side, I would see a similar situation where I saw a lot of individuals seemingly dropping dead, and then their eyes would open and their eyes would be completely black. And I had the real awareness impression this was this black oil that seemed to be infecting them. And so I've had a few glimpses of this myself, and it was quite interesting because as there was a real side experience I shared perhaps about several months ago now, where I was given glimpses of some of the situations that will happen when this simulator is right on the verge of its implosion. There's all sorts of features and facets of it that will occur. There's this fear wave and things of this nature. But there was another curious feature of that as well, where I saw that at the point when the simulator was just about to implode, it seemed the predominant body type throughout the simulator and all the life levels of it seemed to be this mass black gungy slime-like substance. It was almost like a collective, but there was no, like a collective species, but there was no differentiation between the species. It was almost all the body types that would be a part of a collective had somehow molded and meshed together into this one mass that seemed to extend from one end of creation to the other. And I was reminded of a series that featured on TV in the 50s called Quatermass, where there were these huge Gungy-like collective. They almost looked like sort of almost like vegetative sort of slime in their appearances, and these were like the predominant life form, and they were again a sort of a collective species, and it looked very much like that. And sort of putting this all together, it would seem that at the moment now, as I said, it's as though, I mean, the zombie situation is something more so that is with the humans, more so through the vaccinations, but this mutated situation is something that's affecting all species, and this will express overall as the overall effect from an overall consciousness that has become very distorted, regardless of the species that the individual happens to be. And this is expressing now in this sort of overall situation in which this mutated expression of being is sort of spreading throughout the real side. But I have the impression now that as I said, these mutations are like individuals still, but part of a collective. But as this continues on, I think it will culminate in what I saw in that experience in regards to the end of the simulator, where eventually it's like everything will, as the body forms continue to express from distortion that becomes ever more so through the consciousness, that instead of individual mutants, it'll be as though every body type will become almost meshed together into this one mass, and that seems to be the final expression of body type overall, just before the simulator implodes. So I thought I'd just add that sobering bit of information in there.
Yeah, like Dwayne saw the corporation, the like goo, stuck to the wall like clay. They had lines between them, individuals sitting there against the wall, the clay figures, but they're very hard to distinguish, but they're all like glued together, And but we can by our agreement or not agreement, you can start your process of waking up just by losing the agreement, being sincere about wanting to wake up, and life will show you. And basically, I think you mentioned this before, Kevin, that just that moment, you are complete. We talk about being complete. Life is already over here in creation. So just your decision to be wanting to wake up will put you so-called on the path, and you are already complete. You just have to recognize it, go through the process. But that's very important for everybody, just to decide that they want to wake up, do better for themselves. I mean, you do have to lose the agreement from the controllers. That's important. Otherwise, you're still somewhere subconsciously agreeing, and you'll be pulled back. But just sincerely want to be wake up, recognize what's really going on, and you are already complete. But you do have to go through the process, experiences to see that, to recognize that. It's very inspiring to know that you're already, there's a completeness to what we're presenting. But it takes a decision to want to see it.
Yeah, I mean, the movie is already complete. Your movie is basically your intent, but the personal self has to go through the movie. Okay, so this experience here, it's only a short one. It was in 2 parts, but I thought what I might do is break it up into 2 parts and do part 2 on the next show. So otherwise, it gets a bit convoluted with all the detail in it, and so it does stop at a certain point. And then the second part of it followed several days later, but was a part of the first part of it. But I said I'll break up into 2 parts and do the first part today. The following real side experience was from January the 7th, 2021. Over several months, I have been with groups of aware individuals on the real side, and we have been carrying out our various operations, assignments, becoming more aware, and doing the various galactic activities, and so forth. Occasionally featuring with the group has been a specific individual who actually was someone I knew from my school years, someone who would have no interest in becoming more aware, as I receive an occasional message from him to this day, and I know that he remains immersed with his personal self and life only. Curiously though, he does feature in experiences now and then with the groups of becoming more aware individuals and myself, where he surely would have no interest or business in being a part of, and always when he is present, he always seems to try and disrupt to a degree, to adversely affect our operations, generally with marginal success, but he does cause issues and slight delays, as though a disruptor's only success lies in engaging and drawing aware people into their personal selves through the agitation they present, that should we react with emotion, we are removing ourselves from our real awareness, objectivity, and indifference, and are less effective in carrying out assignments that require real awareness standing to execute. A few recent real side experiences involving my group and I and this individual had us travelling through a jungle type setting to reach an area that was full of dinosaurs. For some reason or other, the dinosaurs are probably representing reptilians. On a similar experience, a few days later, we all had personal teleportation backpacks strapped to our bodies that we were utilizing to move from one position to another. We seemed to have to pass through a designated series of positions before we were to reach an ancient fortress that represented our final destination. And again, this individual, who seemed to be my old school associate, caused disruption that drew the group into emotional reaction, which resulted in the teleportation backpacks becoming temperamental and not functioning correctly, as though again our personal selves were muddying the execution of our operation as we chose to step into them through the reactions emotionally to this individual's purposeful disruptions. It's not so much that the real awareness is compromised in its activities. It would just continue on anyway, as it is indifferent to a creation and all the ideas that make it up, the personal selves, etc., and their decided upon emotional idea activations, but more so that the view afforded was compromised and obscured through the personal self-reaction, as we sat more so in the bubble personal self-drama of the created and agreed to situation. And indeed, we were embroiled in a drama on the real side, and would never see the real awareness operation that took place, the entering of this ancient fortress, as was our objective. Interestingly, on this occasion, it's as though I made a decision, a request to see more, to determine as to the presence of this old school friend, though not conscious of doing so at the time. And as this disruptive individual persisted in his distraction, it was revealed as to why this awareness lacking and disinterested old school associate was present in a number of the real side galactic assignments and with the groups. For a kind of a filter overlayer slipped from him, and it became apparent that this individual was wearing the appearance of someone I once knew, as a kind of disguise to conceal his true identity, for he was actually an individual who was on his awareness process, but seemed to have decided to fall back and become more a disruptor instead, still loosely featuring in the groups on the real side, but operating in this manner, as though he was tolerated to an extent, but he was standing on thinning ice for certain, as though being given every chance. But when all is said and done, if someone is choosing to be disruptive, and that is their intent, then they have no place with individuals who are trying to assist in saving the Earth and with the galactic situations, etc. It's as though his association with us had him able to access information that had him select this disguise, as though through trust we had rather opened ourselves up, and he was taking advantage. For surely those that fall back will retain far greater ability and awareness despite doing so, than those who never undertook the process of awareness in the first place. And such characters then can be rather adept at disruption through the additional abilities they have acquired. Interestingly, this person didn't even realize his disguise had slipped, as though oblivious that I had undoubtedly seen through his guise with my real awareness, a disguise that could only be maintained through the more limited view of the personal self. So perhaps a lesson here, for as we openly trust people and let them into our experience, we can sometimes lose our real awareness objectivity, and then we lose the ability to more effectively see through deception, because the personal self has decided that a certain person is whatever its considerations are of said person, and these can either have us colour in the experience with additional personal self-decided consideration detail, or allow the individual that we have trusted to utilise disguises and trickery.
So in a way, everybody wants agreement. We all want agreement in our way, but since life is about survival, it makes sense to support each other instead of trying to control others. And using agreement for control, but if we use agreement to benefit everybody else, and everybody benefits, and everything's okay. So we're all in the same life, so it makes sense for us to support each other and agree, you know, to becoming more aware and agree to supporting life. And you said a real awareness is indifferent to creation. So, yeah, real awareness can't be harmed, but it can stay unaware forever, literally forever. So you can be stuck in creation forever. That's kind of like the Christian idea of going to hell in a way. I mean, they've taken certain things in Christianity and other religions, taken it from like the real knowledge, real truth, real love, real universes, and kind of distorted it. So their version of hell, you could say, is like, you could be stuck in, or their version of, they say, you know, to be disconnected from God is a hell. Well, being unaware, you could be unaware literally in creation forever. That's kind of their hell in another way of saying it. But that's very real. So again, decide to become more aware. It takes your initiative. You have to do something. Nothing's going to be handed to you. You have to earn this awareness. So decide to become more aware. And it will happen if you're sincere. It really will. You'll have other people in agreement with you that are also sincere, and then we all support each other. And that again makes sense. And we can all become, you know, share and see more of life. Life is always becoming more aware of itself, and it's always wanting to survive. That's its aim. It wants to survive. So through us, it can survive better. If we become more aware, it will support us. We support it. We recognize it. It recognizes us. And everything's okay. So read Dwayne's books. Go to Kevin's YouTube channel, New Kevin Smith YouTube. Dwayne the Great Writer. There's 9 books out. And learn more about this wonderful process of waking up. It has nothing to do with religion or spiritual paths. It just makes sense. It's very real, pure, sincere. Highly recommended. Thank you, Kevin. You do the second part on Sunday?
Yeah, the second part is a continuation. It followed several nights later, but it was definitely connected to it, but I just felt it'd be better to break it in the middle.
NUUU. Okay, it's January 12th, 2022. The new Kevin Smith. Wake up. Thank you.